Welcome everybody. It's lovely many of you here today for our Kericho Impact Evaluation virtual event. I've just had a message saying my internet connection is unstable. Let's hope you can hear me well. I'm actually joining from Kenya today. I'm with Arnold and with Maria and Claudette. We're in separate rooms, but we've just been out for a delicious lunch together. So greetings to you all from Kenya. It's lovely to see you all. I'm just going to briefly, for those who don't know Five Talents well, introduce Five Talents, and then give a little bit of background to the programme in Kericho, and then hand over to Hannah, Arnold and Edward, who are going to take you through today. Please do keep yourselves on mute while we're talking, but there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so then please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. Any we don't get to, we'll follow up with afterwards. Other than that, sit back, I hope you've got your lunch and enjoy. So for those who don't know Five Talents, the best way we find to introduce it is always to tell a story. So I'm going to introduce you now to a member. If Megan could just flip on to the next slide. This woman is called Sarah, and she's actually a member from the Kericho programme. She joined a group about 5 years ago, back in 2020, and she told us that before she joined her savings group, she and her family were struggling to make ends meet. She married quite young. She was living in a rural area, and the region she was living in is patriarchal, so she had no say over household decision making, and she had no way to earn an income. So often her children were suffering from malnutrition and hunger, and she couldn't afford the fees to pay for them to go to school. But then through her church, she heard that Five Talents was starting savings groups in her area, and she realised, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what I want, a way that I can create wealth and support my family. So she joined the savings group. Her family had some cattle. In her culture, women are not allowed to own cattle. So it was her husband who owned the cows, but women are allowed to milk them. So she milked the cows and she sold the milk. They weren't yielding very much milk, but she sold enough milk that she could save regularly. And after saving regularly in her savings group for 6 months, she went through some business skills with Edward and his team as well. And thanks to the business skills training, she decided to take a loan, and she set up a small business that you can see in this picture, selling second-hand clothes. So she recognised there was an opportunity for her to make some money in the town through selling second-hand clothes. She learned all about how to set them out well, how to do good customer service. She even taught herself Kiswahili so that she could communicate in the town. She said at first it was quite tough moving from her rural place into the town, but her business took off and she made so much profit. Now she no longer struggles to put food on the table. She says her children go to school and every day she packs them up some lunch and sends them off to school so that they can learn, whereas before they were out with the cattle or themselves. Sarah is just one example of hundreds of people who have benefited from joining community savings and loans groups within Kenya, thousands in fact. And of course, as many of you know, Five Talents now works across 10 countries. Supporting more than 51,000 entrepreneurs through savings groups last year. All of that is thanks to your support, as well, of course, to the hard work of the partners and trainers and members themselves. So we always start by saying a big thank you to all of you. And some of you on this call, I remember, were with us at the very start of the programme in Kericho. Some of you might remember a launch ceremony with a cake. Our friend Emmy cut the cake for us, which said Bright Future Kericho Community Development Trust. That was way back in, I think, 2017, 2018. Since then, the programme has grown and expanded and is now standing on its own 2 feet. But if we take you back 10 years to this map here, before the Kericho program, this is where Five Talents was working in Kenya, in Embu, in Thika and in Nakuru. The Kericho was just the 4th diocese to join the Five Talents family within Kenya. And you can see on the next slide that Kericho is moving more towards the borders of Kenya. So it was the first time that we had expanded to perhaps many learnings for us coming from that, which you'll hear about in a moment. But just before I hand over to the rest of the team, the very final slide shows you where Five Talents is supporting savings groups across Kenya now. So you can see there's been absolutely massive growth and expansion. And all of that is rooted in the learning from our previous programmes, like the one in Kericho. So let me hand over now to Hannah, Arnold and Edward. They will introduce themselves and then share with you the programme in Kericho. And then there'll be lots of time for your Q&A at the end. Also to say we are publishing a report this data in, so if you like taking notes, don't feel you have to scribble down absolutely everything. After this call, we will send out an email with a link to the full report so that you can read all about it for yourself. But for now, sit back and enjoy listening to Hannah, Arnold and Edward tell you all about it. Thanks, team.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see so many people with us this lunchtime, and thank you for joining. My name's Hannah. I'm part of the global program team at Five Talents, and I'm going to facilitate this Q&A. I'll introduce Edward and Arnold in just a moment, but before we do that, just to set a bit of context, we're here today to talk about the evaluation which came after 8 years of partnership with the Diocese of Kericho in Kenya. So after that time, we wanted to ask ourselves, what has changed? What's the impact? But also, how did the programme contribute to that change? And so we conducted the evaluation just after the programme had transitioned to what is known as a SACCO, and we'll explore more about what that means shortly. So the evaluation reached about a quarter of the groups that the programme reached during its time. So 18 groups, and we reached them through a combination of group surveys, so where the whole group was gathered and questions were asked, and then focus group discussions, which gave participants an opportunity to reflect on what they'd seen in the answers the group had given. So the trends, for example, where many had answered or where few had answered, or where perhaps more women or more men had answered. But also to share some of the stories of impact with us as well. And that's been really valuable for our understanding, that contribution from the members in terms of analysis, and also gave the groups an opportunity to reflect on what they had seen change and why. And what we found wasn't just encouraging, but it also gave us some really valuable learning and challenged some of the assumptions. So like Rachel says, we'll send the full report round to you after the call, but just a couple of highlights. So the first was a really strong impact in terms of livelihood. So around 60% of members told us that they had started a new business as a result of their participation within their savings group, and more than half had expanded an existing business that they already had. And the second major improvement was in family well-being. So we looked at things from better housing and food security to things like school attendance for participants' children. And nearly 80% reported an improvement in school attendance. And people also told us about things like, now I am able to provide good food for my child. I am seeing that they are doing better in school, or I'm more consistently able to send them to school. And then the third thing was an increase in women's confidence and involvement in decision making. And we'll explore that a bit later as well. But this was particularly strong in areas where cultural norms had been most restrictive of what women were able to do. So it was kind of a surprise in some ways to see that change in those areas. And then finally, and again, a kind of a surprise, I suppose, was that the strongest impacts generally were reported in the most marginalised areas, and we'll explore a bit about what that looks like within Kericho and what those impacts look like shortly. So before I go on, I want to introduce you to Arnold and Edward, or rather give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So Arnold, I can see your camera on, so why don't you go first and introduce yourself?
Uh, Thank you, Anna, and Rachel before you. My name is Arnold Mwakalindo, and I work as part of the global programs team with Anna, Rachel, and the rest of the team that may be on this call. And I support the Kericho program, but also monitoring and evaluation in Kenya because I'm stationed in Kenya and other countries. And I supported the endline survey that we are about to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. And Edward, are you able to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Edward Koech. I'm the SACCO manager, Talents SACCO. And, SACCO is an acronym for Savings and Credit Cooperative Society. This is actually a natural child of the defunct Kericho Community Development Trust that was started by Five Talents, I think around 2016. So towards the end, the end of the program, then we decided that for the work to continue and for us to continue serving the communities, we needed to transition into a SACCO, because a SACCO has many advantages in terms of continuity of operations. We are able to generate our own revenues to continue the work. Yeah, and that's where we are, and we are happy that we made that decision, and our members are also happy. Yeah, so I'm happy to be part of this discussion, and I'm sure we'll be sharing a lot of insights. We were very happy to do the endline survey. We were supported so much by Arnold, because he came all the way to assist us. We went together to many groups, and we were able to to capture the feedback that Hannah has just shared, among others.
Thank you, Edward. And thank you also to Edward and his team for all the work they did as part of the evaluation. So for those in the UK, a SACCO, which Edward has just explained a bit for us, is similar to a credit union. So it's member owned, and it gives people an opportunity to access financial services, but also to have a say in how it is run as an organisation. So the programme transitioned from the savings group's approach to the SACCO. Edward, I wonder if you might be able to explain a little bit about kind of how some of the elements of the programme are retained within the SACCO model.
Thank you, Hannah. Some of the most critical aspects of the program, for example, the groups. We retain the groups in the SACCO, so we still operate on a group model. We still have the groups in the communities, because we saw, the advantage of having the group is that it's easier for the members to access credit, because they just guarantee one another within those groups when they are taking loans. And then, of course, we are better able to monitor the performance of the members when they are within the groups, because we are able to isolate. For example, if a group has challenges, then we are able to isolate within our system and see why certain members in those groups are not performing well. So the group model is a critical part of our SACCO. We've still retained just a bit of the group visits. Of course, we were not able to continue as a routine, the way it was under the community trust. But from time to time, we still visit the groups to offer them financial skills training, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so those are the critical aspects that we retained, that we are in close contact with the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. So for those who maybe are less familiar with Five Talents' programs or approach, people come together in savings groups, and they save regularly, and then they give loans to one another from their communal fund. And our role, or the role of our partners, is to provide training and support to make that happen, and also, depending on the context, to provide other training as relevant and necessary. So the SACCO provides an opportunity for groups to lend between groups. So for some members, it gives the opportunity to boost the loan fund and to come together under a bigger umbrella. And it also has allowed the work to continue in Kericho, which is fantastic. So one of the changes we saw within the evaluation was that overall 70% of women said that they had found there to be a large increase, a significant increase in their involvement in community decision making. And this was one of the most kind of significant findings, I suppose, within the evaluation. And we found that this was particularly true in some areas of the diocese, so particularly true in Narok and Transmara. So Arnold, I wonder if you might be able to share a little bit about why these changes for women are especially significant in some of these areas.
Thank you, Anna. To respond to that, I need to paint a picture of where that bit of the diocese is. So this Narok and Transmara area is is mostly dominated by the Maasai community, the Kenyan Maasai community. I would imagine the Maasai are pretty popular globally because the Kenyan image is more than often the Maasai image. And in this community, the cultural practices there are very restrictive for women. To paint a firmer picture is that women in the Maasai community are equated to children in the society. So not that they are excluded from decisions, but they are not considered a decision maker or someone you can consult in a household or in the community for any decisions. So anytime where decision making is happening, the woman is in the kitchen together with the kids, while the men would sit and make those decisions. And as you had mentioned earlier, ownership, because of that cultural setup where women are considered as children, then they do not own property. They could buy a cow, but they would not own that cow and end up milking it as part of their duties in the household. So they would farm, but the yield would belong to the man of the home. So all proceeds then from any sales would go to the man. So when we see this high number of women saying that they are now more confident, they are now more involved, it is so significant in how they have grown in the savings groups, which are predominantly women, to a point that they can invest in larger projects, whether for business or home improvement. They contribute to building better homes for their families, building schools in their community, building churches. That sort of scope of business that they get into, that women, that now men start considering them almost as equals, if not equal, because they put their money in the household and they do the larger projects that the men cannot afford to do. And it's been very complementary. So in most homes, you'd find that the man would then seek out the woman because they are economically positioned to offer assistance in the home. And you see, externally, all credit goes to the man. So they are now such a significant entity in the household. And that has been just remarkable for us to realize those lessons from our communities, more so in Narok and Transmara.
Thank you, Arnold, for helping us understand that a little bit, that context. And Edward, I wonder if you might be able to share a little bit about what changes you've personally seen in women's confidence or leadership within the programme.
I beg your pardon, Hannah.
I was saying, I wonder if you might be able to share some examples of what you've seen in terms of changes in women's leadership and influence within the programme.
Okay, yeah. Well, still in the same, Narok and Transmara, and to a smaller extent in, the larger Kericho area, we saw that because, the first members to join Kericho Community Development Trust were actually women, because the program had its origins in the Mothers Union. It was actually started by the Mothers Union. So for a while, it ran as a program of the Mothers Union. And aside from the savings and lending, the Mothers Union also, runs programs, empowerment programs, capacity building programs. And these women who joined the program earlier on were able to benefit from that. And over the years, they have been able to take up leadership positions within the church, so that whenever their local churches are doing development projects, then they even volunteer to do certain things. Like when probably a church is doing a permanent building, then these are the same women who volunteer to, carry on the work because they've been more exposed. And as a result, then they are more assertive in dealing with, the stakeholders that are necessary for such projects to be done. So that is how they have been able to display leadership within the churches, because I know quite a number who have spearheaded, construction works in their churches. In fact, what they did is that they registered their local churches to be corporate members of the Kericho Community Development Trust, and and that continues even now as in the circle. And the churches have been able to do a monthly savings and been able to do certain construction projects, like doing permanent buildings, tiling the floors of their churches. And thanks to these women who saw an opportunity through the savings program for that to happen. So I would say that these women are actually the pride of their communities because of the leadership role they took. Yeah.
Thank you, Edward. I remember also when we were talking about the findings, one of the things that Edward shared was that the opportunity to lead within the savings group had often provided women with the skills that they needed to enter into leadership roles more generally, but also it gave others an opportunity to see the capabilities of these women, and that in turn also opened opportunities. The other thing I remember you saying, Edward, was that these women are now seen, use the phrase, like consultants with within their community. So people often come to them and ask them about business questions or business queries about how to grow their business. And that's really quite a transformation when you think about kind of the context that Arnold was talking about earlier as well. Kericho, as we've discussed a little bit, the diocese covers 4 very different zones. And Edward, I wonder if you were able to just build on what Arnold was saying and just say a little bit more about the kind of context and about how those 4 zones are maybe different to one another.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. So the diocese covers 3 counties, that is Narok, Kericho, and Bomet. And Narok also covers 2 zones, that is Narok area and Transmara. Now, Narok is, traditionally a pastoralist community. So they do less of farming. That is actually the Maasai of Narok. They do less farming and more of cattle keeping, livestock keeping. So that's what Arnold alluded to, that traditionally the cattle are owned by the men. Actually, as a boy grows up, they reach a certain age, and then they are given cattle to start them off. But unfortunately, the girls don't benefit from that. Instead, in certain cases, the girls are even married off quite early. So they also have cases of early marriages. Of course, the government has been doing a lot to address that and to discourage it so that they can keep their girls in school. When you come to Kericho and Transmara, the environment is more or less the same, because these are people who have experienced a little bit of urbanization. So they do small businesses, they do subsistence farming, a little bit for sale, but mostly just for consumption. Now, when you come to a place like Bomet, Bomet also is a place that the program experienced a lot of success. It was readily embraced because again, it gave women and the low-income earners an opportunity that they could not have found anywhere else. That they had an opportunity to save a little bit of money and then access affordable credit. So I would say that those are the differences in these communities. We have extremes in Narok, where they have been held down so much for so long by traditions and culture. But when you come down to Kericho, Bomet, then it's a more liberal environment. Kericho also has a long, a long history of, commercial activity, urbanization. So Kericho, I would say that it's a more sophisticated environment. So in fact, the impact was more on the urban with the low income, like around Londiani, where people got an opportunity to do more than just subsistence farming. So those are the differences. The program initially just concentrated on the rural women, but over time, then others joined in. The men joined in. The people with better incomes joined in. And of course, as a SACCO, then there are no restrictions because the SACCO is open to everybody, being a democratic institution. Thank you, Han.
Thank you, Edward. And I said earlier in terms of impact for women, one of the kind of striking things about the report was that impact was most significant in some of the areas that Arnold was talking about. But actually, that trend was true a lot across a lot of the different metrics. Generally, we found that the areas which were most marginalized, poorer, experienced the greatest impact, which is perhaps counter to what you might expect intuitively. Particularly, obviously, the program relies on people mobilizing their own resources. So I thought that was really interesting. So Edward, I don't know if you're able to say a little bit about that. Why do you think it was that we saw that trend and what you think has changed?
Thank you, Hannah. I think the results were more striking in the category of just talked about, because those are the places that were experiencing more extreme deprivation in terms of access to credit, under better living conditions, like keeping children in school was a challenge for them. So I would say that it was more striking because it was on the extreme end. That's why the results were more marked in those areas. Of course, for the other areas, I would say that they had experienced a little bit of these opportunities to access credit. Kericho, for example, is very, very competitive in terms of SACCOs. There are so many SACCOs in Kericho, very well established ones, some established even in the 1960s before independence. So Kericho has a long history of SACCO activity. But I think for the rural Narok, it was something completely new, that they had an opportunity to pool their savings and access credit. So I would say that because in the metrics we were measuring what changed. So I mean it was naturally more marked in those areas of Narok. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think when we spoke before, Edward, you were saying there's also a change in how people see themselves, perhaps in and see what they have. I don't know if you're able to say a little bit about that as well.
Yes. The results actually showed that people got an opportunity, for example, in the rural areas of Narok. They don't have the electricity grid there, so we saw quite a number of members who were able to install solar lighting, and after installing solar lighting, some were able to buy small television sets, radios, And, but the most important thing that we were able to note was that the solar lighting enabled their children to study in the evenings. So they were able to report that their children were doing better in school, and they were more enthusiastic about attending school, because now they were able to post better performance in school. So the other area that we noted a striking improvement was in nutrition, because the members were able to report that now they're able to feed their children better, and naturally, then these children are able to attend school, because in most of the rural settings, the children they trek long distances to get to school. So when they're hungry, of course, they are not able to, make those long journeys. But now with better nutrition at home, then, they are registering better attendance in school. Yeah, so those are some even installed, tiles in their homes, to make their home environments better. Some improved their housing in totality, and that is something which took time to register. And I think that transformation is still going on. We are still seeing it even now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think the results around children, what it means for children, the knock-on effect are really something to celebrate, because obviously we know that has a long-term impact. And people were saying their children, like I said earlier, are doing better in school, attending better schools, attending more regularly. So really fantastic to see that as well. So please do put any questions you've got for Q&A in the chat, as Megan said. Just one final question before we come to the Q&A. One for Arnold. Arnold, are you able to say a little bit about what Kericho, what this evaluation has taught us as Five Talents, and how it will shape how Five Talents works elsewhere?
Certainly, Anna, thank you. So quite a number of reflections that we were left with after this evaluation in Kericho. First and foremost, just recognizing that the model, the savings-led model, and the credit that it provides, the capital it provides to these communities and women is very catalytic. But beyond that, the trust that they share in groups amongst each other, and the training support that they get from Edward and his team is very, very impactful and transformational. That is the bedrock of the paradigm shifts in the community that places the women on this trajectory to grow and transform their lives. That was the first important lesson we got out of this. The other one is around women empowerment modeling, because there's a lot of that going around our globe right now. So that lesson was that empowerment must go beyond access to credit, access to a platform to save, access to a platform to invest. It must transcend access and focus on inclusion, like should be anchored on inclusion, ensuring that the structural barriers that kept these women in the space where we found them are addressed, and get these women to own these programs, own their capital, own their transformation, own their change. They are included in it, they design it, they interrogate it, and they decide where that transformation leads. So that was something that was quite profound for us. And as Wilfred, as Edward had mentioned, the issue of leadership, just having women at the core of things, when they are being seen to do things, when children recognize that their mothers are doing this for them. In church, when women are seen to lead service, lead worship, read the word of God in school, addressing boards of management, because we have boards of management for most of our public and private institutions. Seeing these women address and take up these platforms, this recognition and visibility fuels their leadership in the community, and breaks those cultural connotations such as women are considered children. So that was pretty profound for us. The most significant, I feel, from the case of Narok and Transmara in the larger Kericho area, is that the most underserved in our communities and in our programs yield the most profound change. That is where we recognize the most transformation. And more than often when development organizations come into communities to partner or work with or in the development agenda, most organizations would then go into areas where it is easier to realize results. So like in our case, in the Kericho setting, it would have been easy to get into Kericho, the center, where commerce is already ongoing. We have systems, we have financial institutions, and say that we have transformed communities and locked out the Naroks and the Transmaras because those are difficult areas to work with. But we are recognizing that is where we need to invest. Where change is hardest, that is where as an institution, we must invest because that is where that matters most. As we say, we serve the underserved, those are the underserved, and that's where we should be. And then finally, in the scope of this evaluation, this evaluation was just not about numbers. It wasn't about the 70% in leadership. It wasn't just about the 60+% who are saying they've started a business, but the narratives behind those figures. And those narratives, the stories powered by our communities, the experiences that they have shared with us, those are what has built the strategic insights and the lessons that we are getting from this. Thank you, Anna. I think those were our lessons from this.
Thank you, Arnold. And one of the first steps often of the programs that Five Talents supports is what we call resource mobilization, which helps people see the resources they have around them. And these are not just physical or financial resources, but also the experiences they have, the networks they have, the relationships with one another, other organizations, education, all of these things, so that they can build on those. And so I think as well as for Five Talents, there's a lesson around this model being very effective in these places which are more marginalized. I think also it's remarkable that really it's these communities that have built this success. It's not something that Five Talents has given. As you know, we don't give anything. Actually, this has been something that communities have built for themselves, which I think in this context, as we've understood a little bit from Arnold and Edward, makes it all the more remarkable. So thank you, Arnold, for sharing. We've come to the Q&A section, and I can see some people have been putting some questions in the chat, so thank you so much. One of the questions here is, you mentioned that women are starting businesses in sectors traditionally led by men. Arnold, are you able to say a little bit more about why this matters and what this looks like?
Yes, Anna. So as we had initially intimated, so in Kenya, and even more so in rural Kenya, in places like Kericho and Narok and Bomet counties, you'd find that men often invest in big money projects, while women often invest in the small retail projects, quite informal, very small. That's the sort of space that they are in. So hearing stories from women getting into, say, the matatu industry, which is our public transport industry in Kenya, is quite profound. Because ordinarily, even in the capital, in Nairobi, in Kenya, that is a business that men ordinarily dominate. It is rowdy, it is chaotic, it is not structured, a lot of infights and gangs, even in Nairobi. That is a sector that is controlled. So getting to rural Kenya and getting women that are in a space where they want to challenge norms, perceptions, owing to their own transformed perceptions and paradigms is quite impactful and very impressive for those communities. That is why that is so significant for us. And not just the matatu industry, but construction of rental houses, given that these are women who a few years before could not own an asset like a cow or a goat. And here someone is building a shop, rental space in a high traffic market area, and they are able to say, that is my property. That is very significant. Dominating construction, even in churches, as Edward had mentioned, all this construction, all these projects, because it is not like we have a curriculum that says, as a savings group, please build a church or school. That is something that they come up with on their own. Those are the goals they set for themselves, and they end up actioning it, even in the absence of men. So that is pretty significant.
Thank you for sharing that, Arnold. So the next one is about statistics. I wonder if we might maybe come to Rachel first and then to Edward. So I think this question is about reach of the programme. So understanding a little bit about how many people are involved in the programme, perhaps at the stage that it was the Kericho Development Trust before the kind of end of the funding of Five Talents, and then maybe we can come to Edward to share a little bit about how it's gone now that it's transitioned to the SACCO.
Sure, I was involved in the development of the original plan for the programme in Kericho back in 2017 when we launched it with some of you on this call. And I recall our initial target was to reach 48 savings groups over a 5-year period. There were 48 parishes in Kericho at the time, so the vision was to have one group in every parish. We were thinking there might be 12 in year 1, another 12 in year 2, another 12 in year 3, another 12 in year 4. As so often happens, it didn't quite play out like that. When the plan came off the page, off the paper, off the spreadsheet into reality. But the first couple of years, we did start around 12 groups a year. We found that membership was actually quite a lot lower in the Kericho groups than when we had started in Thika and Embu. If you remember that map I showed you at the start of this call, Thika and Embu, quite central in Kenya, smaller dioceses, better infrastructure, easier to travel around. Kericho diocese, if you recall, much, much bigger, vast area, far fewer roads. People are living much more spread out, much more dispersed. Parishes were much smaller, population was more spread out. So we found the groups were averaging 20 to 25 members. So in the first couple of years, membership was quite small. Another couple of years later, of course, we had this thing called COVID, which delayed matters quite a lot. But then the programme really built momentum. And part of that was, as we've heard on this call, about the growth of momentum in the Narok and Transmara regions, where women were much more marginalised. And I do recall as Five Talents having conversations in the early days saying, can we make this work in Narok? Can people really manage to save in Narok? Maybe our model just doesn't work there. And what we found over time, and as you've heard in this evaluation, is that actually it does work there, perhaps better than anywhere else. If women can go from only being allowed to milk a cow, they're not allowed to own it, they can only milk it. And now they can own a matatu business, they can own a minibus business. That's huge transformation. And that really gave us confidence, I think, to realise that this model could work well, even in especially in the most marginalised areas. So fast forward to 2024, when the funding from Five Talents ended and the programme graduated to become a SACCO. At that point, there were 68 savings groups in the programme, so far in excess of the 48 group target. And there were 1,866 members. I'm sure since then even more people have joined, and Edward will update us on that. Once the programs graduate to become a SACCO, the Five Talents funding ends, and the SACCO is able to generate income from the interest on the loans to cover its operating costs. So the Five Talents funding is no longer needed, but the program continues to grow. So let me pass to Edward, who can give us the very latest membership figures, I'm sure.
Edward,
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. When we transitioned to ASACO at the end of 2024, yeah, it's true that we had about 65 savings groups. At the moment, we have about 74 groups. We decided to merge some that were too small. We decided to merge them. And of course, along the way, we found that some were experiencing quite a bit of a challenge. So under the SACCO, our focus is not so much to increase the number of groups, but just to recruit more members into those existing groups. So from at the end of 2024, we had like 1,900 and something members. Currently, we have upwards of 2,200 members, and still growing. We also made a deliberate effort to register more corporate members. The church departments like Mothers Union, the Kenya Anglican Men's Association. We also registered our institutions. We also have quite a number of schools, the church-owned schools. So we also brought them on board. We registered them, and they have been able to grow the credit. The savings base of the SACCO. That is in addition now to the high net worth individuals that also we brought on board. We also had to shift focus significantly to the urban areas, because we realized that if we remained rural based, then the program would not be able to stand on its own feet. So we had to create a balance that even as we continue offering services to the rural, the rural marginalized communities, we've also brought on board, a good mix, just to be able to make sure that the program is sustainable. And I would say that that was the right approach that we took, because now we are able to generate enough revenues to cover all our operations. Yeah, and we are seeing a significant growth. And we are seeing a lot of interest from members and communities in the SACCO, because the beauty of the SACCO is that it's the members who own it. So because of that sense of ownership, then they've been able to embrace it more. Thank you, Rachel. Dan.
Thank you so much, Edward. And perhaps a similar question building on that one for Arnold, about people from urban areas or that kind of thing joining the program. How does that work in terms of maintaining the ethos, the focus of the program? Is that seen as something that's positive, or is that a challenge? How do you see that?
Thank you, Anna. So having some people from the urban areas, from a sustainability perspective, strengthens the SACCO positions, because you get to mop up significant savings from the wealthy in the urban, from the urban populations, and prop up those savings as capital that goes into power the lesser groups in the membership. How that ends up playing is that you have people who had small savings but can access multiples of their savings. So if initially someone could only access twice their savings, the increased savings and capital position them to access 4 or 5 times their savings, and they end up investing in more, in bigger businesses, meaning they end up getting larger incomes compared to where they were. So in that sense, it really strengthens the sustainability of the circle. When you look at it from the governance of the circle, because as Edward had mentioned, the circle is member-owned. But because our circles are unique in that they maintain the group's identities, then these groups nominate delegates into the governance structure of this circle. So that manages the threat of elite capture, where we have a few individuals taking over the management and the ownership of the circle. That hardly happens because the nomination then happens from the groups, because they would nominate delegates into the governance of the circle. So that threat is managed in that way, but we get greater benefits in having access to more capital for our communities to use.
Brilliant. Thanks, Arnold. Of course, for Five Talents as well, you might remember from those maps we showed at the beginning, when we first started working in Kenya, we worked in the Diocese of Thika, and then Embu, and then Nakuru, and Kericho was number 4. We're now working in 15 different dioceses across Kenya, reaching more than 20,000 savings groups members last year. And that growth is possible because some of the older programs have indeed graduated to become self-sustaining through becoming SACCOs as well. So we really want to celebrate the hard work of all the team in Kericho, from Emmy, who started the program all those years ago, right through to Edward, and all the support from the Five Talents Kenya team. I remember when she launched the program, when she cut the ribbon and cut the cake, Emmy said, even spiders' webs, if they join together, can catch a lion. So I love that image of the power of people coming together and using what they have to fulfill something that's. Before we wrap up, I'm going to just ask one final question to all the panel. It's a question for all of us, actually. Just very, very quickly, in one sentence, what was perhaps the most surprising or the standout statistic from the evaluation, and why? So let's go to Hannah first, and then Edward, and then Arnold.
Thanks, Rachel. I think for me, it would be several of the statistics. I feel like that's cheating, but around how people's perception of themselves and how they're perceived by others, how fundamental that was to many of the changes that we saw. And I think also how it was the communities, and particularly the women themselves, that drove that change. So women becoming role models for other women was something that was really critical to that. And I found that really encouraging, but also really interesting and really something to celebrate as well.
So I would say that, we were able to get feedback on probably the areas that we had not reached very effectively. And of course, we needed now to work out how to reach those communities, because we realized that we still have a lot of work to do to reach, the extremes of the whole diocese. And there are areas that we've not reached even up to this point. So we really, got critical lessons on how to approach, the areas that we've not yet covered. Yeah, so the evaluation was quite an eye-opener, just to show us, that we have a lot of work ahead of us. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And Arnold, over to you.
Thank you. For me, there are two, and I'm not sure if they were captured. So one, we had the issue of school attendance for the children of the households whose parents are in the savings groups. That was, I think, 79% school attendance. In a community where, I think as at 2023, the last study in the area, 58% of young girls aged 13 to 18 were married. So seeing 79% school attendance, that was quite significant. And the other bit now, as a Christian, some of the undertones and the background conversations, because I was involved in getting with some communities and just recognizing the number of churches that have been built as a result of the program. So those are the indirect outcomes that we hardly ever talk about. The classrooms that had been constructed by the women from this savings group. I think there were up to 6, if I'm not wrong, Edward. And that was pretty amazing. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. I love the one on school attendance as well. When I think of that story of Sarah I shared at the start, where her children could not go to school, and then thanks to the business she set up, she was able to send them to school rather than them looking after the cattle, so that they will have a much brighter future. So thank you so much for that quick roundup. We had communities taking power of their own development, really building schools, building churches. We had more children going to school. We had Edward sharing that the evaluation was a real motivation to reach further and further into the even more remote parts of the diocese. And Hannah reminding us that so often it's actually your perception of yourself which governs what you think you can do, which is always one of the things I love about Five Talents. We think it's about savings groups, about money, about access to finance, but so often it's actually about access to the skills and the self-confidence that means you can use those well for your own future, but also for your whole community and your children's future. So we'll end there. We're at the top of the hour. I want to say a huge thank you to Edward, to Arnold and to Hannah, and to all of you, particularly those who've walked with that programme in Kericho from the start, but all of you for your support for Five Talents. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.